Is it recording? I think it is. Let's do this then, shall we? Hello and welcome to In the Pocket, the bass guitar podcast where we get the lowdown on the low end. My name's Jonny, a totally average bass player, and each week I'm joined by a different co-host to talk all about that bass. This being the first ever podcast in the series, and even, it might only be the only one. We'll see how it goes. Who knows what will happen with this? We're just going to start it and see what happens. Each week I'm going to be joined by different guests. This week, because I wanted to test things out and I don't want to embarrass a guest if it turns out to be really rubbish. So the guest is just going to be me. I'm just going to be talking to myself, bouncing off of myself. I mean, it's a great start when there's lots of noise outside. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, normally, this is the bit where I would talk to the guests, find out what they're doing with their lives. Are they a professional bass player? What is their favourite bass? Blah, 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 blah. Talk all about that bass to them. And I'm going to do that by talking about 3 staple questions to that guest each time. This podcast isn't so much an interview with that person. It's a little bit, but also I just want to get some different opinions each week on the different questions that come in and the different news items we look at. So we'll talk about the structure a bit later on. So these 3 questions I'm just going to ask myself because I'm sat in my room by myself. I can see my cat Panda looking at me. She's just gone to the toilet. It stinks really bad. So bear with me if I don't make it through this. So anyway, first question is the 3 words to describe your bass playing. For me, I think I play really hard with a pick. If you've seen my YouTube channel before, you know that I am primarily a pick player. So I would say number 1 is aggressive. I play quite hard, whether it's slapping, fingering, or picking. I do it quite aggressively to get that tone out of it. Hence why my tone works quite well with compressors and preamps because I push it quite hard. So I would say aggressive, clangy. I am a big fan of opening that tone pot wide open and having a nice trebly presence to cut through the mix whilst gluing it all together in the low end. So aggressive, clangy, and a bit of a boring one, I suppose, is I'd say functional. I'm definitely a bass player that plays to the means of the song. I don't really like it when bassists show off too much in a song. It can really take me out of it. As a bass player, I listen out for that kind of thing. But even to the average Joe, you're moving to the bass, aren't you? That's what the rhythm is. You're in the rhythm section. No one's dancing to the guitars. They're dancing to the bass, even if they don't know it. And so if it's getting really too complicated and going really high up where it doesn't want to be, I get distracted by that. And I think the audience would too. So I describe my playing as functional. It goes technical and more interesting where the song demands it, but mainly I like sitting in the pocket and serving the song, shall we say. And that's why I wanted to call this podcast In the Pocket, because I thought that was pretty fun and it kind of describes my bass playing a little bit. That was a very long-winded answer to that question. Let's move on, shall we? So the next question I'm going to ask everyone is, what is your number 1 bass? Now for me, number 1 bass is a touchy subject really, because since starting the channel, I'd say I don't really have a number 1. My number 1 used to be this Fender Jaguar, which I loved, and I really regret modding and then falling out of love with and selling. Since starting the channel, my kind of attachment to basses has loosened a little bit because I know that I could sell that, I could buy that, get that because it's for the channel. Hey, but that doesn't stop me from fundamentally loving some basses that I have, and so. Right now, I'd say my number 1 is my, certainly for my band as well, Nova Mora, what I used in the recording, and what I'm probably going to use live as well, is the Sterling by Music Man Ray 24CA, which I reviewed, probably coming up to like a year ago now. And yeah, that thing is incredible. I love Music Mans and I love Stingrays, the way that they feel, the necks. Oh my gosh. And and just that classic massive magnet pole piece in those bridge humbuckers. If you've been playing another bass for a while and you think, yeah, this is great, and then you just go back to playing a Stingray, oh my, it's almost like you don't know what you've been missing. You're like, oh, how do I like anything else? Oh, every time I play it, it's absolute bliss. I've never had a bad tone out of that bass. It just sings, and the clarity is chef's kiss. It's my number one, but I would like to get the next one up. I think with Music Man basses and Stingrays, the higher you start going up, the better they do get in terms of like clarity and the pickups and that kind of thing. So yeah. It's kind of a mid-price range bass. It's around, I think it's about 600 new. So yeah, it's not too bad, but I think you get what you pay for. It's a great bass. Anyway, moving on. Is the last question, which is, why did you pick up the bass? Why the bass? For me, my story is very much like, I hate to admit it, but I was a failed guitarist. I started out playing the guitar and I didn't really enjoy it that much. My timing was good, but I couldn't do chords that well. And it's still something I struggle with today, to be honest, when playing the guitar. I can play a little bit of guitar, but not like I can on the bass. The bass guitar just made more sense to me, and I much more enjoyed the rhythmic part of it. I'm quite a percussive player, and yeah, I just really fitted in with me more, and some guys, at the time it was that classic thing of I just started playing. My friends were playing guitar, they were looking for a bass player, and then I just never looked back, really. I've owned a handful of guitars along the way. I've always got one with me in my little setup in here. But yeah, that's where it all began, and I haven't stopped since. Those are kind of the three questions. I want to say they're quick fire, but come on, they're not really quick fire at all. Those are the questions that I'm going to ask people at the start before going into your questions. So leading up to me recording this, I put out a poll on my Instagram, which is where I'm going to be asking for all of these questions. So go and follow me at Jonny Dibble on Instagram, and where you can submit your questions for this podcast, for the guests, for me, for whatever. So our first question, the first ever question asked on this podcast, quite a big one, that we'll probably answer a couple of times on here, I think, because it's probably always going to change my opinion, and it is about signature basses. If you could build your own signature bass, what would you choose? Color, style, pickups, hardware, etc. And this comes from YouTube user Wendell Sunshine. Thank you, Wendell. Oh god, I'm wheezing now. You might inhaler. Hang on. So this has changed drastically over the years, and what I like is always changing as well. For me, I think it would have to be a precision bass body with PJ configuration. I think probably like a modern C-shaped neck, so not like a super slim jazz neck, but kind of a midway between your 50s P bass and a jazz bass, like a nice comfortable, I want to say like a Music Man style neck. To be fair, that would be beautiful. In terms of specific pickups, I just think this is all passive as well. I don't really want an active circuit, just all straight up passive, no funny business. Probably with some like Seymour Duncan quarter pounder type voiced pickups, ones that can really handle a bit of dirt and some aggression, and that can still have that nice mid-range growl that you get with a P-bass pickup, but then be able to blend in that bridge for a bit more presence, because we all love a bit of presence. We're loving presents like it's Christmas. Of course, this is a 4-string as well. I'm more of a dark wood kind of guy. Take that out of context. I think I prefer like your Pal Pharaohs and your Rosewoods compared to maple, especially on like a P base. I want to get as much warmth as I can and then add treble where I want with an amp or with a preamp or something like that. I don't really like basses that sound too trebly and then you have to make up for it with low end. I think that's much riskier game. And so I would not want maple neck. I think I'd go for a rosewood rosewood fretboard. And then colour. I totally go through phases in colour. At the minute, well, here's the thing. So my signature thing at the minute, you might have seen it with the Fender Mustang I did and my new jazz bass, is having the pickup covers be different colours. So having the P-bass pickup be a cream and then the bridge pickup be black and then have a black scratch plate. So there's like this contrast, and then have the body like a natural or like an aged walnut or something like that. At the minute, that is what or shell pink. Come on, you can't not like shell pink. Bloody motorbikes in the background. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get our guests in future episodes to answer that question as well, because that is such a fun one and my opinion is always changing as well. But yeah, thank you so much for the question. Let's move on to the next segment, shall we? Now it is time to, like I said at the start, get the lowdown on the low end. What is happening in the world of bass? Here I've got 3 news items with me. Starting off with some new releases. We have finally got a look at the new basses from Harley Benton. That being the Marquez, can't quite know how to say them. I think they're called the Marquez basses, so that's what we're going to call them for the purposes of this, I suppose. Wow. We've been waiting a long time for these, and were they worth the wait? Absolutely not. Oh my god, where to start with these things? So we've got some 4 and 5 strings. I'm just going to get a picture of them up on my phone whilst I talk into this. I've got a really good opinion on Harley Benton, but these are just missing the mark. Like, we've got the 4 strings have got a PJ configuration. The 5 strings have got a dual humbuckers, which I think is great. I'm not a huge fan of 5-string P basses or PJ. I think humbuckers suit that 5-string, that low B, really well. So I think that's a good decision. But these are active basses. I don't really like affordable active circuits that much. And the shape of them. If you haven't had a look, I mean, I'm going to be talking about the look of something on a podcast. It's great, or audio format, really helpful. They look like a mix between, I don't even know, almost like a Strandberg mixed with an Ibanez mixed with a Dean mixed with a BC Rich. I don't know, man. They really, the horns are too pokey out. The finishes look great, really cool finishes on there, but compare that with the headstock. I don't know. I've seen a lot of comments just saying like, "Oh, this is cool." Really not my thing, but cool anyway. I think they've really missed a trick by not making. Yes, that is what I meant to say. They really missed a trick by not making these headless. The headstock looks real ugly on these, I think. And if you just crop it a little bit, take off the headstock, they actually look all right. Like, it's not too bad. And even, maybe this started off as a headless, because the shape of the body, where it looks like it's got some kind of arch, like you're meant to put your leg there or something, like a flying V. It looks like that would be the perfect place for the tuning pegs to go on a headless bass, like you get at the bottom, at the bridge. So I don't know if that started off like that, and then they've just kind of gone, we'll leave the body like that. That's fine. I don't know, but these definitely don't tickle my pickle. I'd love to try one. I'd love for them to prove me wrong. Harley Benton are great for proving people wrong, but looks wise, I can't say I would choose to choose to don one of these. To be honest, I don't know why they didn't go for like a short scale or something. The short scale phase has been in for years now, and Harley Benton haven't released anything. I'm really surprised. Normally they like to jump on that and offer something affordable market, because think how many people want to try a short scale but don't want to fork out cash or like over £200, £300 for a Squire just to try it out. They would sell like hotcakes. Or, you know, come on Harley Benton, just give us a Gibson Ripper. Do it. Okay, moving on to our next bit of news is Laney. Don't hear much about Laney in the bass world. They have just launched their Dibble line. I love that name, Dibble. Sounds very posh, but I think it's about something to do with Birmingham, where they're based or come from, I guess. I don't really know the heritage of Laney that much, to be honest. I've never really taken that much notice of them as a manufacturer for bass. The Dibble range has piqued my interest, if I'm honest. It looks really cool. So we've got a couple of heads in there, a 200 watt one and a 500 watt head, all the cabs you'd imagine that can go with it, and also a like a preamp pedal as well, which is really cool. If you're listening to this, Laney, send it to me right now. Right now, please do it now. Okay, thanks. So with the Dibble head, that is what is the most interesting to me, because I see lots of artists that I like endorsing it. Aaron from While She Sleeps, the guy from Dinosaur Pileup as well, like quite alternative bands that produce tones that I would be interested in. You know, the Dinosaur Pileup tone for bass is great, so if he's endorsing this, I'm listening. And also like the guy from Attila and from Skindred, I think, you know, some heavier bands that I wouldn't associate with Laney. So yeah, I'm really, really interested to see what the fuss is about. What's really cool about these is that, you know, they are solid state. What's interesting about this is that it has a tube channel. There's no tubes in there, but you can switch between your FET channel, which is totally solid state, and then to the tube simulation channel. And then, so you've got the option of doing that, and then you've got the option of blending the two. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds with the clarity of the, the clarity of the solid state, and then the absolute filth and warmth from the tubes. I think that is something that really speaks to me as a bass player. So I would be really, really interested in learning more about these and trying one, because they look really cool as well. You've got all your preamp options on there as well, and mid-frequency range, and a tilt knob. You know, I like a good knob, and if it can tilt, great. The tilt knob basically can go from, it's like a low end and high end balance knob almost, like you just twist it all the way anti-clockwise for more low end and more high end all the way clockwise. I think that's quite handy for just like tweaking on the go. So if I'm in a room and I'm like, oh, it's a bit too boomy, but I want a bit more presence, I can just do it with that one knob. I don't know. I'd love to experiment with that, but it's an interesting release anyway. It's good to see that they're innovating a little bit and stepping their game up, because I'm interested. And the last bit of news is something that I hate to end on some sad news, but it's really, really sad news. And you probably already know this already, but in case you didn't, it is the news that sadly Mark Hoppus has been diagnosed with cancer. I don't know when this was necessarily. I think I saw it pretty soon after the news broke. And yeah, obviously Mark Hoppus, the bassist of Blink-182, huge influence for all of us, I'm sure, particularly us pop punk lovers, and, you know, people that love playing with a pick will obviously be inspired in some way by Mark Hoppus. And yeah, obviously all of our love from myself and the bass community goes out to Mark and his family and family and friends and all of those that are impacted, but especially to Mark himself. It's a horrible thing to go through, and yeah, sucks, man, sucks. Cancer's the worst. Well, what a great way to end the news. Fantastic. Ugh. Okay, let's liven things back up by moving into another question. This one comes from username Oscar I Toast. Oscar I Toast? Yes. Not is toast, just Oscar I Toast. At Oscar I Toast on Instagram. Thank you, Oscar. This says, how important to you is being creative as well as satisfying your need for creativity? Whoa! I feel like we're getting deep. We're getting deep on this first episode, and you know I like to go deep. As a bass player, I mean, of course. I've always been a creative person, and I've always had something on the go, whether that be a business idea, a band, whatever. I've always got something on my mind that I want to be working on as like a side hustle. I love a good side hustle. And YouTube is my current project. It is my side hustle, and hence why I'm starting this podcast. I love all forms of media and content and the production process behind it all. Pair that up with my passion for playing bass and music, it's like a no-brainer for me. And I think that really came into play during lockdown. A lot of people's passion, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will be missing live music so much, and that crave for creativity and showing that off on a stage is a feeling that you just cannot replicate in another way. And so starting the channel was my way of having something creative to do, because otherwise I would have gone mad. I would have gone bloomin' crazy, sat at home doing nothing, maybe just playing video games. And I love as much as I love sit down doing nothing, I can't not have something that I'm working towards. And so I feel like the need to satisfy my creativity through whatever medium is so important. Creativity is so unique to everyone that there's no one way of doing things when you're being creative. I have not got a clue if that's answered the question, but there we go. There's going to be a lot of that on this podcast, so prepare yourselves. Thank you so much for the question. Let's move on. So, moving on to the next segment. This one is called That Tone You Own. So every week I'm going to get our guests to bring along a tone of theirs, and we can have a listen to it, review it, break it down, talk about what it's made out of, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. Because there's always things we don't like about our own tone. It's never perfect. That's why we like to buy lots of gear, to see if we can get it better and better all the time. So my tone, I'm playing through the Sterling by Music Man Ray 24CA, straight into the Cali 76 by Origin Effects compressor, and then really simple, just into the Line 6 HX Stomp. That's what's doing the bulk of the amp simulation. And I only go between two amp sims on the HX Stomp. It's normally the Gallion-Kruger one or the Ampeg one, and the Ampeg normally comes out on top for me, just because it's got a bit more lows in there naturally. And always paired up with the 810 Ampeg fridge. So this is the SVT4 Pro amp. So let's just have a listen, shall we? So obviously that's with a pick, and I play super hard, and the compressor does a great job at bringing it all nice and level for me. And so without the compressor, it sounds like this. So fine, but the compressor definitely just adds a bit of spice to the tone. So off, on. It's pushing it a bit harder whilst not distorting it too much. It's just keeping it all controlled, which I really like, and works really nice for slap as well. You know, maybe there's a bit too much gain on here naturally for that slapping. But if I turn the volume down a bit. The Line 6 HX Stomp obviously has loads of stuff on it, and I don't use it to its full potential, I wouldn't say. Mainly I've just got it for the amp sim for when I'm recording all my reviews, and I use it live as well, but not in the way that maybe you should. You can like split signal, send it out to other places, that's all fine. But I haven't really experimented enough with it through my live rig yet, because we've been locked down. We've been no gigs and hardly any practicing allowed, so it's just been at home really. So let's go into the distortion now. This is the Diana drive, and I don't know which this is modeled after, but it's probably a guitar pedal, but it sounds great when I've got it on a separate channel on the HX Stomp, so that the low end is kind of remained intact as much as possible. So this is how it sounds with the distortion. So I've also got, so it's a really nice thick distortion. Obviously there's a Sans Amp clone on here, there's the Ampeg Scrambler, and there's the Dark Glass pedal. But I just like doing this, to be honest, putting it on a separate chain and just seeing what it can do. My other pedal, Compulsive Drive, which is the OCD clone. So let's have a listen to that. I love combining those two sounds. Always gives it like a synth sound, which I've really digging recently. So EQ wise on that amp, boosting the mids a little bit. I'm giving a bass and treble boost. I like, your classic smiley face EQ with the mids scooped out a bit, but Music Mans, I find the humbuckers seem to, have this natural mid scoop to them. And if it's too scooped, you kind of lose a bit of that presence, I think. And so I quite like having it boosted just a little bit to stand out a little bit more. But yeah, there's my tone. There's some things I want to change. I do want to maybe take the HX Stomp off and put it, just use it at home. And then I really want to get a smaller Sans amp and get maybe the Doug Pinnick Tech 21 pedal, because oh my god, that distortion sound. So I do actually have the Sans amp on here now, but I kind of think with this tone, with this bass, it kind of takes it out a little bit. So this is without the Sans amp. Here's with the Sans amp. I love a Sans amp, but at the minute, with this bass in particular, it's kind of already got that spice that I look for in a preamp that adds onto it. This is an active preamp on board, so you don't want to overload that signal too much. Even though I think the Sans amp kind of takes away a little bit there, I just prefer the sound of it without it, to be honest, that cleaner sound, which I think Music Mans, well, I keep saying Music Mans, this is a Sterling. This is a £600 bass made in Indonesia. And yeah, I just think it really provides so much of that tone already that you don't need to add too much. So there we have it. Moving on. So we've had a couple of questions already, and every week we're going to finish off the podcast with one of those questions, but we're going to talk about it a bit more. So that is the big bass debate. The first ever big bass debate comes from Callum on Instagram at Callamord Music. Callamord Music. I can't remember, mate. I'm sorry. So his question, thank you so much for sending it in, says, what's your opinion on high-end versus budget/better value basses. Now, feels like quite a loaded question, being that my channel focuses mainly on affordable basses. And, those that have watched before will know that is my domain. That is where I dwell in the affordable market. I don't think I've ever spent over £600 on a bass. That might change soon with something I've got my eye on. But I've just never felt comfortable parting that much money, even though this is my passion, and I love value. I love getting value for money. I'm very much a DIY person. I don't like paying for things. And so if I can do it myself, I will. Or if I can get something to sound good at a good price, then I will. I also think that a lot of tone comes from your hands. And so I think that it's, not as hard as you think to get an affordable instrument sounding good. Just takes practice. So going back to the question, opinion on high-end versus budget and better value. Now, there's no two ways about it. Like a high-end guitar, so you look at an American-made, for instance, American-made Fender is going to be better than an Indonesian Squier. There's no two ways about it. All the components are better. It's had more hands on it, more actual people doing it. It's more handmade. It's got, it's less mass produced, so there's more time to go through quality control. And you got to think about that process of how these guitars are put together. I do think, however, there is a certain price point where the value for money starts dropping off. And then you start paying, you're just paying for the name, the country of manufacture, and it's hard to explain all in one. So I'd say that whilst, if you had, I'll use this as an example. If you had an American-made instrument, all the components that you have for it, all those high-quality things, if it was mass-produced in Indonesia, it would cost probably half of what it does. It's the main thing that you're paying for is the name on the headstock. So, for instance, Fender, and then the how much the people are getting paid to make it. So, people in the California factory are going to be on a lot higher wage than the people in the Indonesian factory, and how much they're mass producing it. It's going to be cheaper for them to pump out more of the affordable guitars than it is to do more of the expensive ones. So that's how they drive that price down. And so it's an interesting topic. And I think a lot of people will instantly be like, no, I won't have anything that isn't American made or that isn't handmade or over £1,000 or dollars. And I do think that is a bit short-sighted, maybe. I don't like hate elitism. Is that the? I'm sure that isn't how you say it. Elitism. No, elitism. I hate people. I hate elitists. Basically, they will instantly poo-poo someone for having like a Harley Benton when actually they've never tried one themselves because they're too stubborn to even give it a go or even consider it. I think that's just. Like, how can you have a well-rounded view on basses if you've not tried those lower-end ones? I don't know. And appreciated them as well, because we've come a long way in the last 10 years. The manufacturing process has evolved in such a way that we can produce such high-quality stuff at an affordable price. Even with things like inflation, they're still driving that price down. And maybe that isn't such a great thing for things like air miles and things like workers' rights. If we're paying people less and less for what they're doing, or we're using more machines to do it and employing less people, that there are ups and downs of these things. But if we are just talking about the quality of the instruments, where it starts to depreciate in value a little bit, for me anyway, what I think is around the £600 or £700 mark. I don't quite know what that is in dollars, but about £700 to £600, you're going to get a really good quality instrument. Anything past that, you start just paying a premium for where it was made and who has made it at the end of the day. So yeah, that's just my kind of view on that topic, and I'm sure you guys at home will have various other opinions on that, and that's fine. That's fine. All of this stuff is opinions. It's not facts. That's just what I think. Some people might have had amazing experiences only with expensive instruments and had terrible experiences otherwise. There is something to be said with quality control as well, where the more you mass produce, the more likely it is that mistakes are going to get out. Whereas if you're getting handmade American stuff, you're less likely to get a lemon. So there is a bit of risk that comes with the more affordable you get. But yeah, I have confidence when buying from affordable manufacturers, and I know what you're getting, and I quite like work. Sometimes you got to work around, or I don't know, I'm just a bit weird, to be honest. But yeah, that is all we have time for now, and I'm sure that this first episode is super bloated. Let me know, whether it be in a DM on Instagram at Jonny Dibble, whether it's a comment on YouTube, or just a review of this podcast wherever you're listening to it. I don't even know where it's going out yet. Who knows? Let me know what you thought, maybe who you'd like to see as a guest host, and maybe what other things you'd like to see on here. These sections I've made up, they're not set in stone. I don't know. Let's make it up together. I want to know what you think, what you want to hear/see. Maybe we'll have a video component. Who knows? Thank you so much for listening. I nearly said watching then. In my YouTube mode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.